Nobody knows even why some houses are called haunted.
What would you call this place?
Well, diseased, sick, crazy. Such houses are described in the Bible as leprous. Before that, in Homer's race for the underworld, a house of Hades.
Hi everybody, this is Irene from the Paranormal UK radio show, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK radio network. And tonight I'm again with my co-host, business partner, and General Tea Boy, Mark Johnson.
And what type of tea would you like tonight? Earl Grey or a little bit of English breakfast?
Oh no, Earl Grey. Earl Grey all the time. Mind you, I do like English breakfast. You know, I really do like English breakfast. When you're in a hotel or anywhere like that or abroad, that's about the best tea that you can get, is English breakfast tea. So, yeah. I like English breakfast tea. I've got stacks of it out there in the cupboard.
Over here you
like
usually get
Earl Grey in the afternoons.
Yeah, over here you usually get Lipton. Yeah, I mean, they don't do tea like they do over there.
No Darjeeling?
Not very much. Some Earl Grey I've seen, and of course you have a lot of the apple spice and constant comment and all these other flavors.
But Mark, you wouldn't even know how to drink a cup of tea, would you? I bet your little pinky doesn't go up, does it?
Hell no.
No?
I'm American, so that would be a hell no.
You've still got a little pinky.
Yes, but it's not going to go flipping in the air. I have another finger that can go in the air.
All right, then. So how was your weekend?
Not bad. How about yourself? Other than the fact that we're still in August and it feels like we're in mid-October. It is so fall-like weather here. It's unbelievable.
Oh, you're joking. It's been baking here all over the country.
It's baking in other parts here, but I'm in the Northeast here, up in New Jersey, and this weekend we had temperatures in the 70s. I got down this morning when I got up. It was in the 50s. I mean, this is it's starting to turn into...
It's all over the place, isn't it?
Hoodie and bonfire weather, which, don't get me wrong, it's my favorite time of year. I love it.
Well, last week it was raining nearly all week, and then we hit, I think, Friday. Friday it was a scorcher. Saturday was even hotter. Today was meant to be cooler, but it's even hotter than Saturday, you know, and Sunday. It is absolutely scorching over here. Really scorching at the moment, but tomorrow we've got winter, so... You know, it's going to be raining and thunderstorms. A lot are coming in tomorrow.
Oh, good. Maybe it'll cool down for you.
Yeah.
We shall see. We shall see. Well,
you're going to introduce our guest.
Yes, I'm going to introduce our guest. I figure we'll get right into the show. We're welcoming back these two gentlemen that were on the show a few years ago, and.
No.
When was last? Oh, no, that's right. When I was out, you had talked with them previously.
Yeah, we had done a show a couple of months ago. Yes, Ooh.
Well, they're back, and their documentary is coming out. Extraordinary, The Seeding. So we want to welcome Jon Sumple and Jack Roth to the program. How are you tonight, gentlemen?
Doing great.
Doing great. Thank you.
Hello, John and Jack.
Hello, Irene.
Hello.
Now, let me ask. I did get to see the screening copy of the movie. I'll just, cut to the chase. Anybody wondering? It's brilliant. Love it.
Absolutely brilliant.
Has this been released yet? Is this in a location where people are able to watch it, or is this something that you're still working on?
Oh, it will be released a little over a week from today. It'll be next Tuesday at 3 a.m. in the morning. It'll be available on digital platforms pretty much worldwide. So if you have access to iTunes or Vimeo, Google Play, Vudu, Amazon Video, not Amazon Prime, but Amazon Video, and the Xbox and PlayStation platforms. It will be available on anywhere basically where you can watch video pay-per-view. It will be available.
Fantastic.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, we'll get it over here on Amazon.
Awesome.
More than likely.
Now,
I will be having it on Amazon.
Now, this is your second documentary in the Extraordinary series, correct?
It is, yes. Our first one was Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story, and that came out in 2013. And yes, this is the second in we're calling him Extraordinary Stan Romanek story, Extraordinary the Seeding. It's really and the third one as well. It's going to be a trilogy, if you will, and to try to take our viewers through this kind of journey of discovery and understanding. So yes, this is the second of the three.
Now, the Seeding. Could you just, well, first of all, what made you tackle this particular topic? You know, the first documentary dealt with one person's experiences with the abduction phenomenon, but in this one, you focused on several different people who've had their experiences. Tell us how this film was developed, how it came about.
Well, it was really because of the first one and what had happened when we made the first one. And we'd been approached by some women who had basically in the first one, we talk about, again, as you said, one man's journey, his experiences. But we kind of teased it at the end with the fact that he had these hybrid children and they were contacting him. They were communicating with him. So what we did was we talked about it and we were like, you know what, we need to dig deeper into this whole idea of the hybrid children because this seems to be the reason why these abductions are happening. So we had been approached by a couple of women who we were introduced to who had talked about having these false pregnancies where they were pregnant one day, not the next, and with no evidence whatsoever of a miscarriage, where the doctors were perplexed and gave them the explanation that their bodies simply absorbed the fetus, but there was absolutely nothing at all, like no evidence at all that the baby the fetus had been there in the first place. So we knew that we wanted to keep going with the story we started, not about Stan anymore, but more about the phenomena and what was happening. More specifically, even than that, was the people who were having these experiences, because they kept coming out of the woodwork and we kept hearing from them, men and women. Obviously the false pregnancies with the women, but men being abducted and saying they were contacted by or found out they had hybrid children. So that's kind of how we got to this point right now.
Now, I go back to even Whitley Strieber when he started it off with his book Communion back in the 80s. And even in Communion, he was one of the first to bring up the idea or the concept of the sexual aspect of these abduction experiences and hybrid children experiences. I believe he's even seen what were supposed hybrid children of his own. He dealt with situations where he would remember a embarrassing sexual encounter where he was being observed not just by aliens but by like other human beings, like from the military, were watching this take place. And even going back as far as the Betty and Barney Hill case, I mean, one of the things about that case, when it came out, it was very controversial to begin with. You're dealing in the 60s. It was an interracial couple. That alone with the topic made it very controversial. But it was held back a lot, discussing the fact that they were taking semen samples and ova from Betty and Barney as part of this hybrid program.
And it's something that, you don't know where to start with the storytelling, because these are the first times they've really kind of been presented. So we kind of put the benchmark back into that time period of the 50s and 60s, but it may have started thousands of years ago. We don't know for sure, but what we're trying to do is explore the implications and what that means as far as sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction in the way that we commonly understand it to be is a union of man and woman, and babies are made. That's in its simplest terms. But that's not the only way these programs are being undertaken with the different alien agendas that are out there. So we have heard of the ovum being taken, inseminated, then replaced back in. We've heard of ovum that has been inseminated and then removed and added a third element, a DNA variation, and then reinserted. We've heard of reproduction through DNA, using DNA or hair follicles or other sorts of ways that we might not comprehend how babies are created. But we've also heard of shared consciousness, which is one of the elements in the story as well. So there's a variety of different ways of reproduction with different agendas, with different, expected outcomes. And, do we know the answers to all of them? No, we do not. So our intention with the film really is to explore the corroborative stories that are being told by not dozens, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of women who've had these experiences, men who've had these experiences of abduction for the sole purpose of reproduction.
There's a lot over the years, and we've had an opportunity to interview a lot of people on this program, and there has been the theory that we ourselves as human beings are a hybrid race, that we were created, and which is why there is no missing link in this supposed evolutionary chain. And now they're finding all these different branches of the human species going back, millions of years. But still, that jump going from Australopithecus, Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon, and now modern human, and yet it seems that they're constantly tinkering with the human race up to here we are in the 21st century. It's like it's an ongoing experiment almost.
Yeah, and I think that's we always talk about the fact that as we go through these things, as we make these films, we have these discussions and we talk about it. We talk every day, and we talk at night, and we talk at meals, and the team, and we sit there and we ask these same questions that you're asking. And you're right, though, the evidence would suggest that there is something to that, and that perhaps we are all hybrids. We were created as a hybrid species. And we have to keep that in mind. And we, again, though, it's interesting when we're making these films, the important, we have our priority is to make a compelling film that people are going to enjoy, they're going to learn from, and that it's going to compel them to ask questions, to have conversations, to have more conversations about these things, because we think that's most important. And obviously to also see that people are suffering, other human beings are suffering as a result of some of the things that are happening to them. So yeah, but I think those some of these questions are fascinating, and personally, we all have our opinions as to whether that's true or not. I happen to personally believe that it is. I think that, at least, again, the evidence suggests, looking at it objectively, that perhaps we are all hybrids. We're all part of the same cosmic dust. We're all part of the same. We all come from the same place anyway. So really, what's the big deal? And I know Jon has an opinion on that as well. But first and foremost, we approach it. We approach it as filmmakers, and then we have all this stuff that's coming in, and all these questions that we're kind of pondering and throwing around in our heads. With
the people that you've been interviewing and the stories that you're collecting for the documentary and telling the story, Do you, and I guess this is going to have to go towards your personal opinions. What is your opinion on what is happening? I mean, it's easy for pop culture to say, extraterrestrial aliens from Zeta Reticuli are coming here and they're manipulating and creating hybrids, maybe to save their dying planet, or all these other outlandish ideas that there's no proof of. But yet, I've always been of the opinion that this phenomenon is very misunderstood. I believe that these beings we're dealing with, we don't fully comprehend who they are or what they are, not just being aliens from another planet. Are we dealing with beings from other dimensions, other realities, interacting with ours? Are these beings comparable to what we would consider to be godlike or evangelic, or beings that they would have talked about thousands of years ago? So my question in a nutshell is, who the hell do you think these people are?
So my answer to that would be yes.
Well, there you go.
So what I mean by that, though, is that everything you just talked about is just like, I think that's just like scratching the surface about all the possible agendas and the possibilities of different races and the possibility of existence beyond our comprehension. They're all happening. And for anyone to say that they know the exact answer is, they might know an answer, or they may have an interpretation of an answer, but nobody knows the absolute truth, because it has yet to manifest itself in a way that we can comprehend. And that being the key issue is what can we comprehend? We have a tendency as humans to think linearly. We think of, the beginning, the middle, the end. We believe that we're moving on a straight line through time, as opposed to the possibility that we're living as interdimensional beings. And it's not something within our paradigm of existence and belief structure that we can comprehend that. So that's a big part of what I think we're going through in this era of humanity, this existence, this slice of humanity, is that we're starting to ask the questions that get us closer to understanding the possibility that we may not just be living on a planet in a three-dimensional realm. It may be much more sophisticated and much more intellectual and much more philosophical and much more spiritual than what we can comprehend right now. So, that what is it is hard to define, because there are, like you said, there's so many different theories, there's so many different explanations, but there's also so many different corroborative stories of people who've had experiences that are similar within those different paradigms or those different verticals of storytelling that corroborate that those things may all be happening at the same time. So the challenge I think that we have as documenters, of storytellers, as those who are willing to get the information that is currently kind of simmering in the fringes and in the shadows, and move that information to the mainstream conversation, that's when we start to dive a little bit deeper. We start to dive a little bit more quickly. We move through the understanding a lot faster when people are asking questions. So one of the themes in the film, as both of you having seen it will know, is that we talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay circles, and the concept behind the essay circles was a perfect fit for this film, and we thank Richard Dolan for sharing it with us, is that every time a circle of knowledge expands, it opens up tons of more questions than there are answers to. So every time we push the envelope, every time we stretch out our understanding of who we are, why we exist, where we come from, where we're going, hundreds, if not thousands, of more questions are asked that make it even more complex to grasp the whole. But as long as we keep expanding the circle, our level of knowledge, our level of understanding expands along with it. So we're at a point in time where, if you look back 100 years ago or 500 years ago, the understanding of the cosmos was quite different. And where we're going to be 100 years from now and 500 years from now is going to be quite different too. And if we accept that, and we're willing to go along to the journey of thought now, where we might be in 100 years or 500 years, we move to the understanding a lot more quickly. So, long story short, to answer your question, it is an unknown, because there may be a variety of different answers to that question that all may be true.
Plus the fact that we may be dealing with, it seems to me, and based on the evidence and the interviews with so many experiencers, that we're dealing with multiple entities with possibly multiple agendas that are maybe at odds with each other. They're competing agendas. There's not just one alien race coming down here and trying to change humanity for whatever reason. It seems like there are lots of things. There's a lot of moving parts going on here, and they're not all on the same page.
Right. And that makes it even more complicated, right? Because we talk about, well, if one ET species is coming down here, they are abducting humans, they are doing experiments that are leading to the hybridization of a new species. That's one thing. But then what if there are, I always go back to, Clifford Stone, who, ex-military whistleblower. He says that there are 57 confirmed species, ET races, ET species that have communicated and or worked with our government military. That's an enormous number, and it's hard to believe that. It really is. But if you think about that, it makes it even that much more complicated. But here's what we like. If you ask just simply, what do we think is happening? What we do see is that these people are being abducted in large numbers, and when they're being abducted, they're all talking about being having tests done on them and being poked and prodded for the purposes of some kind of the final product of that is hybridization. There are these children, and this seems to be what the agenda is. Now, there might be various agendas, but the hybridization part of it seems to be happening to thousands and thousands of people. So that's, we can say that when I can say personally, I feel confident that is happening. That part of it's happening. There might be all that other stuff that John mentioned. I also believe is part of it, which makes it an extremely complex puzzle. But based on our experiences of making these two films, the hybridization projects or programs it would seem that those are definitely occurring for whatever reason.
I remember reading Dr. John Mack's his two books. There was, I believe, Passport to the Cosmos and Abduction. And, with him being a hypnotherapist and doing regression on a number of UFO experiencers, alien abductees, talking about not only hybrid programs, but also, and I don't know if you've gotten into this or if it's something you'd be looking into further down the road, that there is more of a, I don't know how to say this because it's so out there, it's more of a spiritual aspect in that these bodies, these hybrids that we're creating are for vessels so that these other higher level of entities that don't exist on the physical can come in to the physical and interact. He had many patients who claimed that they lived past lives as aliens and agreed to come to the planet to be abducted, to go through all these experiences like as a human being, but that they are actually part of these entities. So my long convoluted statement here is that in the interviews that you've conducted with witnesses, did you encounter any where people felt like that they came originally, maybe in a past life, were part of these other entities and they're here for that purpose?
Yeah, we've had several people that we've interviewed that appear in the film, that we've interviewed that don't appear in the film, and also that we have since engaged with as a result of the promotion of this film, who have shared that. So we've had numerous conversations with people who said they chose this path, they chose to come here, they chose to be experiencers. I would say that Geraldine is definitely one of the people in the film who recognizes that she had a a mission to accomplish, and that she's on that mission now. Her story is very, very unique because she had no recollection of any abduction experiences until 2013, and then she had a very vivid abduction experience of being taken from her bedroom through the wall in aboard a craft and shown children. So she was disturbed by that, obviously, and her initial response was not to share anything with anybody because it was, how do you tell this to anybody that's going to believe it? And here's a woman who's highly educated, was working as a professional. She had a six-figure salary in her career. Shortly after that experience, she met somebody, wound up getting engaged. She shared a little bit about her experience with him, and his message was, yeah, we don't really want that to get out. That could impact your career, it could impact your family, and if we have children down the road, it could impact their engagement. Think of the ridicule that they would go through if they, it gets out that their mom was abducted. So she buried it. And then 4 years later, she said it was something that was gnawing at her that she needed more answers to. And she decided to go and have a regression. And it was in January of 2017. And after she got out of that regression based on what she experienced, she came back and broke off her engagement with her fiance. A month later, she had her second regression. She was shown a lot of information and was connected to the electromagnetic field, and is now all of a sudden wakes up and is a sensitive. She's intuitive. She has connection to source, and she leaves from that second regression and decides, I need to quit my career and now focus all of my energy on helping other people who've gone through abduction experiences. So this is someone who has made a conscious decision to help other people as a result of what's gone through her, and her connection to source, her connection to, I guess you could say, her past, her present, and her future, is that she's on a journey that she's supposed to do this work. So she's a perfect example of somebody who's gone through that experience. And Rob Fullington, one of the other experiencers in the film, his experience is not so much about sexual reproduction, but about consciousness and shared consciousness. His story is that he is having his consciousness removed from his body and placed elsewhere in a vessel or across the room, and witnessing things that are going on to him personally, his body. So there's a connection to, in his story, to the mantids. And he says, I have a mantids consciousness, something that I never knew about until I started having my experiences in 2009. So you talk about people who have the switch is flipped, and all of a sudden their lives change as a result of their experiences, whether it be something like Geraldine, who has changed her entire life, or somebody like Rob, who has a different understanding of consciousness than someone who's never been through that before. So yeah, those type of things, when you hear them, and you hear them not only once but multiple times, you start to have a better appreciation for what people are going through and what the possibilities of our existence truly are. And that's really important, that people need to spend the time, not just watch a YouTube video for 5 minutes and make a decision, not see even an hour and 45-minute documentary like this and make a decision. You need to sit down with people who've been through these experiences, do some more research, have a better appreciation for what the people have gone through and the messages that they're delivering, because there's a lot that we can learn from that.
And it's a learning process. It's a learning and growing process. And you mentioned something a little bit earlier, and we touched on it again here, about what was the concept called? A shared consciousness. There is one experiencer we interviewed a few years back. Her name was Susie Hansen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's from Australia, and she had a book called The Dual Soul Connection, and talks about her experiences with not only the abduction phenomenon, but having like a shared consciousness between the her human half and also an alien part. Now, when you're mentioning this kind of a shared consciousness, is that something similar to what you're referring to?
Well, Rob's was more like a transplanted consciousness. We've also met and talked with people who have like a dual existence, that they're kind of not a split personality, but basically there's a consciousness that's sharing their body along with them. So I'm sure that's probably what Susie's referring to, is that it's almost like you have that the entity, that voice is always with you. It's sitting on your shoulder, and you have a connection to whatever that existence is as a part of your earthbound, physical being. So, but Rob's was a little bit different. He talks about it as more a matter of, aliens are creating pods, if you will, these beings, these skin bags, so to speak, of grays, and they're stealing consciousness of people while they're sleeping and putting the consciousness into these beings. So basically cloning grays and putting human consciousness in these grays so that they can, as Rob says in the film, go out and do God knows what. So that's what he's been exposed to. That's what he's seen as part of his personal experience.
Sorry, but if they're taking a lot of people, going on a lot of people I know, there's going to be a lot of funny greys running around. Not very intelligent ones either. Oh dear.
Yeah, maybe that's why some of them seem just so robotic.
Yeah. Honestly, when you said that, I'm sorry, but I just saw all of my friends, the really daft ones, and these little greys mimicking them,
But just imagine that. That's not something that we can wrap our minds around, is the whole idea of our consciousness being borrowed at night or borrowed when we're in trance. That is profound.
And what does that say itself about the nature of consciousness? I mean, we tend to look at our lives being awake during the day. We're fully conscious. We seem to feel that is the utmost pinnacle of our self-awareness and consciousness. This is who we are. And in reality, the more I talk to people, the more I've interviewed people, the more I've experienced, it almost seems the opposite now. It seems that what we are experiencing now, that we think of as life, as consciousness, isn't. It's so limiting that we don't have the access in this state of mind to the more totality of reality, that there's so much more out there that is all around us, but our consciousness, our physical awaking consciousness, limits us to what we can experience, what we can comprehend or even understand.
Yeah, and that's, again, I think that's one of the reasons why this is such a difficult area to, for people to comprehend. I think that a lot of people, imagine if you're someone who has been, basically indoctrinated since they were a kid. They think one way, they were taught one way, which is the case with, billions of people on this planet. And, they're still trying to wrap their head around, is that a craft in the sky that's not a helicopter? You know what I mean? So, or does life exist on other planets? That's pretty much a 3D kind of paradigm, right? Because that's we're physical. We came from the up from the seas, and we developed and from a single molecule, and we became who we are. Could that happen on another planet? So it's something that's tangible that you can wrap your head around. Now think about what we've been talking about for the last 5-10 minutes. How in the world are they going to jump from trying to, and I say they, that includes, I don't consider myself an indoctrinated person, but to go from, you're trying to wrap your head around what are these beings, who are they, and what might they be doing to us, to, well, it's all, is this part of this conscious, is it part of conscious awareness, or is it part of something more than that? That gets heavy. I remember when Rob was telling that story to us, and after we were done with the interview, we're like, well, Rob, when you meant, what did you mean by that? Did you really mean that there was actually like a shell body, and then that your consciousness went into the body, and that you were seeing yourself in that body, your consciousness was part of that body, and then you came out of it again? And he's like, yeah, pretty much. And if you try to describe that to the person who's sitting on the fence about are UFOs real, and are there really unidentified craft in our sky, then it just think about that disconnect. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just crazy, right? So it is and you know what? In the end, it might very well be what we've been talking about here. It could be so complex on so many levels, as Jon said, philosophical, intellectual, just spiritual, that we can't even come close to comprehending what really is happening.
I think it's more. Did you say his name was Rob?
Yes.
I think it's more the other way around. I cannot see that they would want to take air consciousness. Now, these are superior beings to us. They're higher level and everything. So much more intelligent than us. Why would they want to take air consciousness with low intelligence and put it into something? Surely it's that they are putting their intelligence into us.
Irene, I'm gonna interject here, because I think you're looking at it from the wrong perspective.
Am I?
Well, if it's not just a consciousness, okay.
But the subconscious is far bigger than the consciousness anyway.
But our consciousness compared to our subconscious, superconscious, the higher self, everything that's within inside of us is much more advanced than our regular consciousness. So
that's right. The subconscious.
So if they're looking, maybe with these bodies, they're looking to impart, our consciousness in there. I wouldn't look at it as, say, they're going to take Joe the plumber's consciousness and throw it into an alien body, and then he's going to wake up and go, oh my God, what am I doing? How do I fix this pipe now with 3 fingers? I mean,
where's my plunger?
It's not that situation. I think, again, it's much more advanced in terms of, because again, and again, it gets into some really mind-bending ideas.
I would have thought that they would want to take a subconscious, because the subconscious is so much bigger than the conscious mind.
But I guess when we talk about that, though, I don't think they're saying, let's just carve out this little portion. I think they're taking like the essence of our maybe it could even be soul essence. Who knows? But there's something that they value that we have that they don't. So they're otherwise, why would they be doing what they're doing? Why would they be because we look at them as advanced, supreme in so many different ways. Why are we such an interest to them? In the same way that we're interested in different species on our planet that we want to study to better understand how they navigate their existence, how they know intuitively to do what they do. So there is this unknown element that they may be exploring in the same way that that we do the experiments that we do to better understand life as we know it.
There's also, and I go back, I mentioned it earlier with John Mack, but I'm going to bring up another example. And I mention Whitley Strieber a lot because I've had the chance to talk with Whitley on a couple of occasions. I've read his books, and he, for me anyway, started presenting some concepts that I had a real hard time with back in the beginning, and now I'm starting to really feel that there's so much more to it. Is with what they're doing with the bodies, with this hybridization program, it's not so much, I think, an experiment to see where they're going to take humanity, which still may be part of it. I think that, and I hate to use the word because I'm not trying to put it in a religious aspect, but it might have a lot more to do with the soul than that spiritual essence of who we are than it is the physical. Maybe they're trying to perfect or work on these physical bodies, because if we look at it, if you want to believe in the idea of, okay, let's say reincarnation, if we're spiritual beings here having a human existence, or maybe we had alien existence before. We're here temporarily. We die, the spirit leaves, it could come back, or maybe it's interacting with these beings on a much higher level. Whitley mentioned on several times during his abduction experiences, meeting with people he knew that he didn't realize at the time had died. They were dead, and yet he met them during his experiences on these craft. Was he meeting a ghost? Was he meeting them in a different type of dimensional setting? But he seems to feel that there's something to do with the soul and the recycling of souls, and how, as part of being just a small part of the whole hybridization program, they're not just trying to perfect the physical element, they're trying to perfect it for the spiritual element. And I don't know if I just confused the hell out of you or not with all that.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, no, I'll one of the things that I remember reading about and that I've heard from some experiencers is that they, meaning the ETs, are really fascinated with our connection to quote unquote source and our ability to not only our ability for love and compassion and some of the things that apparently they don't have as strong of an ability to connect with. But when you hear that, we'll say, well, what do you mean our connection to source, our strong connection to source? And I think that obviously means spirit. So yeah, if souls are reincarnating, and we've been reincarnated over and over again. Some people are reincarnated on Earth. You can be reincarnated in other galaxies, on other planets, in other dimensions. That certainly would explain the idea that we perhaps human beings are I'm going to say special, but have a unique place in the universe, in the grand scheme of things, and what would explain why they're so interested in doing these types of experiments on us. So, and of course, again, there is no way we could know what the truth is, but I have heard that. I have heard some abductees talk about, they're really interested in the fact that we can connect to dogs and cats, because on their planet they don't connect to other species at all, but yet we can love a dog and a dog can love us, or we have the capacity to really truly love a dog or a cat or a horse. When you think about that, as human beings, we take that for granted. Of course, we're animal lovers. A lot of people, obviously, dogs, cats, horses, whatever it might be. So maybe they don't have that kind of connection to other beings, other species. And maybe from that standpoint, we are special in that way.
It's an interesting concept. Being an animal lover myself, I mean, it's that empathy and being able to empathize with other types of creatures. Maybe that's something they're lacking. Sometimes I think they do lack a sense of humor too.
Right.
Although I do remember the one time in talking with Stan, that he had mentioned Stan Romanek, and again, I know there's a lot of people listening to this. They're going to have a lot of questions mentioning Stan, considering everything that's happened in the last couple of years. We will touch on that to a certain degree, but I'll bring it up a little bit later in the program. But the one experience he mentioned in one of his books was, he had an abduction experience, and he was wearing a T-shirt, but when he was returned, he was wearing like a woman's nightshirt. I don't know if you remember that story.
Sure.
And that he it wasn't his, and he had no idea what it was. But the funny part about it was, he could just imagine some woman or some other person waking up wearing his T-shirt, which says, "I was abducted by aliens, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt."
Right.
And then it turned out much later on that it was Betty Hill.
There was that was a lot of conjecture around that, and I think Kathleen Martin kind of put that to rest. I believe that it wasn't the case, that is actually what happened.
Okay.
But there was a lot of speculation around that. But that's that was one element of Stan's story that was people would hear about it and it'd be like, wow, that's kind of crazy. So he definitely came back wearing something different. Whose it was, we really don't know. But that's not the only time we've heard that. We've heard that on numerous occasions where people have come back wearing different articles of clothing or having lost clothing along the way. So that is not an uncommon occurrence. So people who are like, oh, Stan's making that up. Well, and there are other people who have numerous other people who have shared similar stories. And that's one of the things I think that's important about what we're trying to do, is that the idea that people's experiences, their storytelling, the corroboration of events or sequences, or visually what they have seen, smelled, touched, experienced during their time through abduction, should be something we listen to. And when we recently interviewed Dr. David Jacobs for our third film, and one of the things that he said when we were having a conversation specific to, the lack of evidence, he got very adamant and said, I'm sick and tired of hearing people say that there is no evidence. He said, experiencers have been corroborating storytelling and shared experiences and the events and sequences and what they have seen for decades, and we're not taking it seriously. He said it's about time that we started listening to what these people are saying and put it into kind of like a catalog, a record to say, this is evidence. He was really upset too. He said, I'm just over this. I'm over the fact that people think that this is not reliable information. He says it is. Is it empirical? No, but it's corroborative, and corroborative storytelling by thousands of people, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Just imagine if all the people who have had experiences started sharing their experiences, and we got even more and more of that. And that's, wishful thinking on our part, is that this film will strike a chord with people so that they will feel compelled to share their story, find community of other people who've had experiences similar to them, one, to validate their experiences, and two, to make them feel like they belong as opposed to being ostracized. So that's a big important part of that. So if we're able to move the needle a little bit in the direction where people feel comfortable sharing their story and we get even more corroboration, then that would be an awesome thing.
Yeah, and that is the frustrating aspect that we deal with. We pride ourselves on being a scientific race. Everything we have to look at for empirical scientific evidence that can be backed up in a lab, and let's face it, what we're dealing with is not. It's hard to analyze. It's not something that we can always bring into a lab. Sure, every now and then we may get a piece of metal, or we may get something, an implant is pulled out of a patient's nose or behind the ear that we can't explain. But too often, I think our society is conditioned to just automatically dismiss it because it doesn't fit in.
With one exception.
And which exception would that be?
Religion.
Well, yes.
There's no empirical proof, but there's a tremendous amount of faith.
But yet I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but with religion, there's the reason behind that is control, and there's a lot of money and power to be made
not
keeping
amongst
people
us.
Believe. Yeah, I know, but. So that's the difference with religion. With religion, you keep the status quo. You don't want to upset the apple cart. With religion, they think, well, you look at the Bible and it says how man was created and God was involved in this, and that. Well, where are the aliens coming from? And certainly, where is this alien abduction and hybrid children coming from? It does not fit in with that narrative. So that's part of the reason why so many people automatically dismiss it. They don't want to hear it. It doesn't fit in with their paradigm.
But yet their paradigm is just as unbelievable.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's my point, and I'm not trying to belittle anybody that has a belief, has faith. Just when you think about it from that point of view, is that so having a belief centered around something that has no empirical proof, that has had handed down stories, a book that was written and edited numerous times over hundreds of years to fit a desired narrative. As much as people hate to hear that, that is exactly what happened.
Yep.
It is telling a story that people have come to believe as truth. So how is this any different when we start to say, when thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people across the globe, maybe even hundreds of millions of people who've had shared experiences, and when they share their stories, we should, at the very least, listen to them and potentially have faith in those stories that there's an essence of truth to them. So, I would argue, and again, I'm not trying to shit all over people with religious beliefs, but there's probably more empirical proof or tangible proof to the alien story than there is to the existence of a God in the sky. So, but faith is strong, and whatever your faith is, I always say that when you put two people who believe in religion and people who believe in UFOs into the same room, they will fight to the death in their belief structure. And who's right or who's wrong? That one is left to be determined, I think.
Jury's still out on that one. According to some people, for others, not. I also think that we're also maybe still be dealing with something that it's just beyond our comprehension. We're trying to explain it in either a religious point of view, or we look at it as aliens, experimenting on us. But again, this is what our minds can comprehend. There's only so much. Look at the nature. I'll throw this out there. Look at the nature of time. You mentioned earlier, we look at time as linear, as beginning, middle, and end. We were born, we grow old, we die. Time marches forward in one direction but now even science is starting to come out and realize that that's not exactly true, that it's only our perception, that all time could be happening at once. You can listen to people like Dr. Michio Kaku explain it, and talking about string theory, and not only, the nature of time, but the nature of multiple dimensions, multiple realities. Sure. And that just starts making the brain go all sorts of wonky, trying to comprehend that.
Measured time is a human construct.
One of the things Irene and I...
universal construct.
One of the things that we've talked about numerous times on this program when we talk about the paranormal and ghosts is the fact that when people see a ghost, they automatically think, I'm seeing a spirit of somebody who died, and they don't know they're dead, and they're still walking around. And it's more in the last few years, my whole theory on that is changing. Like, is that the case, or are we actually seeing a very living, breathing human being just like ourselves, who happens to be existing in another time that just happens to intersect with ours, because all time is happening at once? And if it is, those people are there experiencing, living their lives in all these different time periods. It's just beyond our physical comprehension.
Yeah, and we've done this throughout human history. We've always thought we knew what the deal was, and then we don't, and then there's a new accepted, these are the facts now, this is what reality is, and then something else happens, and then we tweak that a little bit. When people say Einstein, how could you ever think that Einstein was wrong about anything? And he was most certainly a genius and an incredibly intellectual person, but he wasn't right about everything. Now science is quantum physics is bearing some things out that might change some of his theories, which is okay. I'm sure if you spoke to Einstein and from beyond the grave, or his spirit, he would say, yeah, this is all part of us evolving. I knew what I knew, and now we know more. But human beings are, the ego gets in the way.
Oh, yes.
So we're always going to fight what we don't know. Like if we don't know it now, I always say, you have physics and then there's quantum physics, right? So wait a minute, maybe we can bend space. Maybe Gene Roddenberry was onto something. Maybe we can do some of the things they did in Star Trek. We can't do it now, but we're getting there. Whereas no one thought at the turn of the century in the early 1900s that man could ever go and walk on the moon. Think about that. That would have been the most preposterous thing anyone could have ever said. And if you go back even further, people were burned at the stake for saying things like that.
Well, look what happened to Galileo, with his telescope. Mm-hmm. And
that is the perfect example.
Thrown into prison until he recanted.
Right. And so we as human beings, we're flawed.
But his fingers were crossed.
From behind his back.
Right.
So no, I just think that, and that's this comes back to this. And I love to, when we talk about the way we think and the way we process things, we're human beings. This is part of the human condition, right? We're flawed. We might have some incredible qualities. We might love our dogs, but the ego gets in the way of, a lot of other things. And it's a challenge. And that's why people think we're reincarnated for that very reason. But when we make these films, and I go back to when we're really kind of sitting there talking about this stuff, and it's like, you know what? Regardless of whether or not you believe in something or you're not quite there yet, understand that this is part of the human condition. That these people right now, there are thousands of people on this planet who are suffering. They're suffering from anxiety. They're suffering from depression. They're suffering from, PTSD. They are really struggling to figure things out in their head and to make heads or tails of what's happened to them. So people are experiencing these things. They're having these experiences, whether it's someone who lives in a haunted house or is seeing a ghost, whether it's someone who is being abducted by aliens, whether it's someone who just got divorced, whether it's someone who, this is part of someone who's an alcoholic and the family's dealing with it. This is all part of the human condition. It's happening. And that's what we need to be more understanding of, is that I might not be an alcoholic, but I empathize with other alcoholics. So why can't I empathize with people who are being abducted or supposedly abducted by ETs? What's the difference? They're suffering. Why can't I understand that and be more understanding of what they're going through?
And the abduction phenomena itself, this one thing I've never fully understood. They seem to take great pains in providing screen memories or wiping out and making sure people don't remember what happened to them, I guess, to allow them to try to live ordinary lives. And they fail completely at it because so much comes through, so many memories happen that come through, the PTSD part of it, the nightmares, the everything. It's an imperfect system. They're not able to wipe your memory. I mean, in some ways, I don't understand why they don't just it's like when you go on safari and you shoot a lion, you tranquilize it, and you knock it out. And then you do whatever you're going to do to it, weigh it, tag it, do whatever, and then you let it go until it wakes up and walks away. It's asleep. It has no idea what has just happened to it. And yet, for whatever reason, these beings don't seem to get that idea. Or they need people conscious for part of it for whatever reason. And even though they provide screen memories and masks and they change things, it still enough comes through that it causes people a lot of issues.
I think that might be, and again, my personal opinion on this is that I don't know if it was ever intended to be wiped out completely. It was just intended to help you deal with it in the moment. So, that's why so many of these people who've had these experiences, and one of the things that has happened as a result of people seeing the film, it's triggering things with them, specifically with women, are saying that when I saw the film, it made me connect to something that happened to me in my past that I didn't question at the moment, but now, having seen what I've seen in this film, it's making me wonder what really happened to me in that moment. And a couple of people even said that it triggered a memory. It triggered something more specific in them. And when we screened it at one of the festivals, at the Pasadena International Film Festival earlier this year, I wouldn't say half, there was probably a good portion of women in the room who had experiences that were in tears during the film. And several of them came up afterwards and said, this was profound. It made me connect to things that I had buried, but yet was important for me to deal with. And now I got to figure out how I go about doing that. So I don't think, I'm not trying to scare people from watching the film, because it's not intended to be scary. It's intended to help people better understand two things. One, that there are people who are having experiences that we need to be, as Jack said earlier, empathetic to, show compassion toward. And two, for people who have had experiences, to realize that they're not alone, to realize that there are a lot of other people who've had similar things happen to them, and that by finding that sense, that community, finding people who have had that you can share your experience with, who will comfort you, who will understand what you're talking about because they too have been through it themselves, then you have this sense of, okay, it's okay to talk about this. And that's a big part of it. We think that there are a lot of people out there who are not telling their story, therefore are burying a lot of the emotions that go with that. They're struggling with it, whether they're an individual that's a part of a contributing member of society, or someone who is in politics or sports or entertainment, they're dealing with it because they don't know how to get it out there, how to share it. And that was one of the reasons why we first decided to do a more emotional film, is because after the first film came out, within, I would say, 6 months after it was released, particularly when it came out on Netflix, we had over 700 direct mail messenger messages that came in through Facebook, where people were saying, thank you so much for making this film. I now realize that I'm not crazy. When I see the things that happened in this film that happened to me, I realize that I can validate my experience, my personal experiences, and that I'm not alone. So we got so many different variations of that theme that came through to us. And then since we've made this film and started promoting this one, the second one, over the last 7-8 months, more and more of those messages have come out. I've had a musician reach out and say, I can't talk to anybody about this that I know because it would be career suicide. Do you know anybody that could help me? We've had numerous different couples who have reached out to us to say that one member of the relationship was struggling and didn't know what to do, and it's having an impact on his or her livelihood. It's his or her dynamic with other people, and also within the relationship. So when you start to hear those kind of one-on-one personal stories, you realize that a film like this is more important than you thought it was when you first set out to make it, because it's helping people be more compassionate. It's helping people realize that they're not alone, that there is an opportunity to find community. There is an opportunity to share your story. There is an opportunity to feel validated and not unusual, because this is happening more than people realize. And if it's not happening, why would all these people be having these experiences if it wasn't something that, why would they talk about it? What do they have to gain by sharing their stories other than to let other people know that they're not alone?
With that, I mentioned before, and I want to bring up the elephant in the room, but talking about it from a very specific angle. Your first film, which was the Stan Romanek story. And, obviously within the last few years, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding Stan Romanek and things that he did or said. And, I know a lot of people have very strong opinions about him either way. Where pretty much it's to the point where all their books are pulled and everything. They're not in public anymore. And has that what's happened with that and what's happened after that first film, has that hurt you at all in trying to move forward with these two new films?
No, not at all. And one of the things that we try to clarify, but people, for whatever reason, they just don't listen or they don't want to listen. But people have to understand that we were filmmakers, and we approached doing the Stan Romanek story because it was a really compelling story, even way back in the 2010, 2011, 2012. It was controversial then because there were some things that happened, and people couldn't believe that all of that evidence could be real. With the ET peeking up in the window, peeking its head up and down again. I mean, it just seemed too fantastic for people to believe. So there was a lot of controversy surrounding his story from the get-go. But we decided that it was a story that needed to be told because people needed to see this evidence. They needed to be exposed to what this man was experiencing. And then they could make their own decision whether they believed him, whether they didn't, whether they liked him, whether they didn't like him. But remember, we came at it as filmmakers, and we made a compelling film that shared. We presented the information as it was presented to us in a very objective way. We weren't in Stan's fan club. We weren't, part of his, groupies. We were filmmakers, and we were making a documentary about a compelling story and about one man's journey. So for us, we always knew that no matter what happened and whatever people thought, we did our job as filmmakers, and that as filmmakers, we were okay. We were fine because that's what people do. Look, I always say, our next film could be about Adolf Hitler. That doesn't mean that we support Adolf Hitler or we were in Adolf Hitler's, fan club. That means we just made a story about a controversial, interesting person. Right? I mean, think about it that way. I mean, we just made the film. But a lot of people thought that it was Stan's film, that he had something to do with making the film. And it's just all not true. But you're always going to have people who just they're haters out there, and they're going to hate, and they're going to hate more. And if especially, we made a film that was we knew was going to be controversial, but it did not. It hurt us. And John, you can talk more about this, about the timing of when certain stuff came out, that it did hurt us at first. And John, you could, yeah.
The big thing with that was we knew nothing about it, so we had no clue. So we found out that he had had a raid on his house in April of 2013. The film premiered at a film festival in November of 2013. Then in January of 2014, he had his Peter Maxwell Slattery interview. We were flipping the pen cap, and that created a whole controversy. With that. That was one that was extremely disappointing to us because of the timing. Couldn't have been worse, because we were in the process of talking to distributors about finding a home for the film so that it could be, reach the widest audience possible. And then a month later, following on the heels of that, we get a phone call saying that Stan's been arrested, and had no clue whatsoever what was going on. And to say that we were pissed is an understatement. And I'm like, the timing couldn't have been worse for us. All conversations that we were having stopped with the one exception. They were saying, well, if you would be interested in recutting the film and focusing on what's happening right now, that could be a timely story. And we're like, but that's not what this is about. This is about from 2000 to 2010, what happened to him and what he documented over the course of those 10 years. And it was compelling. Even if you believed 1/4 of what happened to him, 1/4 is more than anybody else has ever had happen to them that has been presented and documented for the public to see. It's profound. So whether you believe all of it, that's okay. You don't have to, but there's enough in there that if you spend the time going through the materials, if you spent the time that we did with him in those quiet moments where he had, emotional breakdowns and concerns, and I've said this before, and if Stan is hoaxing 100% of this, he is the greatest actor of all time. No one has ever been able to pull the wool over people's eyes in the way that he has. It is impossible. And people to say that one of the biggest things that you hear over and over about him is that it's for financial gain. It is not for financial gain. It is for public ridicule. That's what you get for putting out what he has done, is a tremendous amount of public ridicule. Because he said this before. I never raised my hand for this. I never wanted this. If I had a chance to go back and do it all over again, I would not want to be involved with what I'm involved with. So I encourage people who find something fantastic in a story and hang their hat on that to say this is ridiculous. Spend a little bit more time doing research. And then when you have a chance, spend time with people who have had these experiences, more than 5 minutes, sit down with them, have them share their story, get to know it. So once you've had the opportunity to spend some time with somebody and listen to their story and understand the impact that it's had on them emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually, you have a much better appreciation for their story. So to see something in a soundbite or in a YouTube bite or a CNN Larry King boo in the window video, you're going to make a judgment that's like, that's ludicrous, that's stupid. But we encourage you to do the deeper dive to have more exposure to the story. But we were forced, as a result of those things, to self-distribute the film. But we were lucky after we, launched the film in May of 2014 that 3 years later we get a phone call from The Orchard saying, "Hey, we saw your film and we're interested in distributing it. Has it ever had any distribution?" And we said no, other than what we had done on our own. And that's when The Orchard decided that they would be interested in putting it out. They didn't even have to pitch it to Netflix. Netflix saw a screener and decided on site that they wanted to pick up the film. We had nothing to do. We didn't reach out to anybody. We knew that we were responsible for paying back people who had loaned money to us. That was our biggest concern. And when we got that phone call, we're like, "Oh, this is good. This is an opportunity for us to pay back people who helped us get the film made in the first place." So, you mentioned the thing about, it's a sensitive subject. It isn't to us because we knew what we were doing. We didn't have an agenda. We didn't have a fan, like Jack said, we weren't, fanboys of Stan's story, and we were trying to get it out there to help position him in any certain way. It was a very compelling story. We spent not only probably dozens, if not hundreds of hours with him on the phone, and then spent 3 different trips to his house. One time we spent, I think it was 7 or 8 days going over every piece of information that he had. And until we did that, we didn't make the decision. And that was about 1.5 years into having first heard his story that we decided, let's move forward with this. So we did our homework. We spent the time. We wanted to make sure we understood what we were getting ourselves into, because it was controversial then, even more so now. And we get everybody who is upset with him for what he did, for breaking the trust that they had in his story by flipping the pen cap, for doing, what he was allegedly did, as far as the child pornography was concerned. Completely and 100% agree with anybody who would be upset with him and what he has done as a result of those things. But our defense would be, we told his story from what happened to him between 2000 and 2010. Not anything after that. So when you look at that window, profound information, profoundly documented, and worthy of sharing so that people can make their own decisions.
I want to thank you both for how you explained that. I really appreciate that, and I think it really it sets the bar for people to understand as documentary filmmakers, presenting the evidence. I mean, as someone who knows Stan, I mean, and I say that in a past tense. I haven't spoken to Stan in a few years, not since all of this happened. I knew Stan and Lisa, and a part of me, I was very disappointed too in some of the, I believe, decisions that Stan made, which I think really hurt him badly as far as what he was accused of doing. I wasn't there. The jury's out. I can't say what's happening. All I can say is I know people who have been falsely accused of stuff that they didn't do. Mm-hmm. Does that mean he's off the hook with me? No, I'm not there. I can't see it. I listened to their version of the story and what they have to say about it. And what I can say, as far as the evidence goes, going all the way back from his original books and what you presented in the documentary, the evidence itself is still, to this day, very compelling. taking out what Stan did later, and I believe him being a human being, he made some boneheaded mistakes. But when you look at the equations, when you look at the personal witnesses that have, were there and would see things with them, it's not just Stan relating a story. There are people there that can corroborate the evidence. And another reason I wanted to bring this up is because there are aspects of his story that directly relates to this documentary on the seeding, which is the hybrid children. Mm-hmm. And Stan had experiences with a supposed meeting his hybrid children, and not only meeting them, but this is where we get into the whole wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff, as I like to use my Doctor Who thing there, is when he related the incident of being very young and the woman approaching him and talking to him, and later it coming out that this was supposedly one of his hybrid children coming back in time, meeting him. Mm-hmm. Now, again, that's just a story. There's no way to prove that ever happened. But it's very interesting. And I saw the photographs that he had. I see the photographs where the children supposedly show up in them. I'm sure I have some questions on them. As someone who uses Photoshop, there's something about the photos that don't look right to me. Not saying that I think they're faked at all, but they're definitely not.
They're very bizarre.
They're not normal. And
the thing, the thing with. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead. You're probably going to say the same thing I was going to say.
Well, I don't know, maybe, but we should both say what we're going to say because I think it's important. With the photos, there's a photo that was not in the film, and it was a situation where there were a group of people who were together at Stan's house that day, and there was a girl outside standing in the driveway. She was wearing this one-piece jumpsuit, looked odd. One thing led to another. They went out. Stan had gone outside, then one other person had joined them outside, took a photo of this girl running, or somehow they captured her looking out from behind the tree that she had ran behind. Everyone who was there saw this photo, and in the moment saw the photo of the girl. And then what happened was when they tried to get it from the camera to the computer, you heard a click on the camera and the photo was gone. So, but you had, according to really good, strong sources, there were some PhDs at this gathering, that there were grown men crying when they saw this photograph. So when you hear stories like that and you have corroborative evidence like that, look, when I first saw the photograph of the girl on the deck with these huge eyes looking through the slats at the deck. Yep, that's the specific photo I'm referencing. Right, and then there was another one of someone, a little girl at a conference that Stan was speaking at, etc. Yeah, look, I've shown it to graphic artists. We all know graphic designers. Some say, oh yeah, I can definitely Photoshop that. That was definitely Photoshop. Others say that's kind of strange. I mean, you could Photoshop something like that pretty easily these days. You could do anything. I mean, look at Avatar. You could do anything if you want to do. So the ability to fake photos is there. But when you have an incident like that where there's all these people there and they all experience it and they are absolutely, there's this profound emotional impact that people have because this little girl, and the look in this little girl's eyes, which were enormous, huge, almond-shaped, eyes, that changed people's lives. So we're not saying, and again, I try to go about things as we both do, John and I, in an objective manner. We try to look at things objectively, but we literally could have done an entire documentary just on the equations that Stan was writing, an entire documentary. And we, of course, didn't. That wouldn't have served anyone the way the one we did. So we're glad we did it the way we did it. But there was so much there, and so much that people, where you have quantum physicists coming out and saying there is no way this guy could have written these equations because, first of all, he's not smart enough, and that's not a dig, but he's not Einstein, A. B, he's not only is he writing quantum mechanical equations, but he's correcting some of the ones that we're still having problems with as quantum physicists. So how in the world do you explain this? Now, again, we never came out and said Stan's story is true, Stan's story is not true. But when you see all of it and you take it collectively, it is hard. And plus, also, too, I might add very quickly that with these photographs of these little girls, also there were phone calls from these little girls. They are also in the film. And you could always say, yeah, little girls, they got little girls to act and say these things on a phone call. But it just doesn't make it from a practical standpoint, it doesn't make sense at all. And when you hear what they're saying and how they're saying it in these phone calls, you can't help but think that there's something really strange going on with these phone calls. So again, I took photographs, me personally, with a film camera at a plantation in Louisiana. And I was there. I know I didn't fake the photos. I didn't Photoshop. They didn't have Photoshop back then. I took these photos and these apparitional forms showed up on film, one black and white, one color. And they were directly related to the stories associated with this old plantation in Louisiana. So I'm looking at these things. I get them developed. I get them back. And I'm like, wow, I cannot believe this. I show them to Jon. It's kind of the thing that started us on this journey, on the rabbit hole to begin with. But I literally had people look me in the face and say, you doctored these. These aren't real. Do you know how hurtful that is and how insulting that is? And I knew I'm the only person on earth who can be sure that these photographs were real because I took them and I know what happened at the time.
These are the photographs you sent me after the last interview.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
Irene,
they are totally amazing, Mark. I've still got them. I'll send them over to you tomorrow so you can see for yourself.
Well,
they are totally amazing.
The aspect
is that right.
No,
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, the point is that, look, I know I did not fake these photos, yet I have people looking me in the face because they don't believe in ghosts saying you faked these photos.
Been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
What do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're dealing with, and this is why with what we do as researchers, we can present evidence till we're blue in the face. But if people don't want to accept that evidence, it doesn't matter how compelling it is. I've had friends who talk about, having that empirical evidence have the chain of custody shows there could be no possible way of tampering. It doesn't matter. You can show that to a jury, and they'd still let OJ walk. Sorry about that. I had to throw that in there. It doesn't matter. It comes down to we can just try to influence. You could try to show, but if people aren't going to be willing to accept it, they're just not going to accept it. And that's the frustration. Now, I will say this. Especially the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a huge paradigm shift that I've noticed, starting with the paranormal television shows, started with Ghost Hunters and a few of the others, that now we have whole channels dedicated to strange and unusual topics. The Travel Channel, which they never really travel anymore, it's all paranormal all the time. And they are showing different. They have another gentleman. I don't know if you've seen his show yet. It just started. Chris Garitano. He's another independent filmmaker. He made a film called The Montauk Project, and now he has a show called Strange World, and he's tackling these very strange and unusual topics that are a little bit outside the normal paranormal aspect of dealing with, like I said, the Montauk Project or other types of phenomenon. So it's starting to become more mainstream, people are being more accepting of listening to this, yet we're still not 100% there. We're still not to the point where you could walk up to somebody and start talking about aliens, and half of them would be right along with you. They go, yeah, I believe in it. The other half of you are going like, that's the devil. You know, that you're
right,
talking.
But one of the things that we're going to try to do with the third film is to break it down even further into from a belief structure. So we have a lot of people who believe in the existence of these craft in the sky that are being navigated by intelligent beings that are abducting humans, that are having reproductive experiments and hybridization programs and hybrid children. And these three paradigms are vastly different, but they all believe in that sequence, that the lights in the sky, intelligent life, abduction, reproduction, children. They all believe in that, but they're three very, very different outcomes and very, very different belief structures. But it's the religious paradigm, it's the ascension paradigm, and it's the colonization paradigm. Three very, very different outcomes, but they all believe in the same thing. So you have people who are, within the religious paradigm who are very, very religious people, but they do believe in the existence of UFOs. They do believe in the existence of aliens. They may talk about them as the Nephilim or fallen angels. You'll hear from some people that it's all demonic, but they believe in the concept that they exist, and probably because there's enough stories that corroborate that they exist. So that's a big important part of it too, is that just because you may come from a different observance of the phenomenon doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong. The challenge there is trying to understand who may be closer to being right than the other groups. But you talk to someone in the religious paradigm, it's the Bible is 100% right 100% of the time. You talk to the ascension people, they'll tell you that it's all about raising us to a higher vibration and it benefits all humanity. And then you talk to the colonization crowd led by Dr. David Jacobs, and it ain't pretty. It's going to end badly. Mm-hmm. So, but three very different outcomes that all believe in the same thing. I liken that to politics. I liken that to religion. You might have a different belief system, but it's all believing in the same thing.
Well, it's like a gentleman I know here in New Jersey, Dave Stennett. I don't know if you've met Dave, who believes that the extraterrestrials are demonic. People who work that religious aspect in. They believe in the extraterrestrials, but they believe that from a religious standpoint that it's all demonic, which is, again, it's oversimplified, because in so many different ways, what experiencers go through, it causes great stress, post-traumatic stress syndrome that they suffer from, physical scars, emotional scarring. Yet what are they dealing with, evil? Or is it just that's the only way we can interpret it, because we don't know how to handle it? It's beyond what we understand. It's like, why would somebody do this to me? Because, because we don't understand it.
Well, two of the abductees in the film come from a religious background, and both had their faith challenged as a result of what they went through. And how could God allow this to happen? How could God allow a child that is mine or a hybrid child that is mine to be shown to me and then taken away from me? Why would that happen? It's a struggle. But if someone who is a faith-based person has an experience like this and they don't know where to place it, but they're adamant that it happened to them, they're adamant that their experiences are real, it challenges our belief system. And this is the big thing that we talk about all the time, is that we don't know what we don't know. But what we're trying to do is present enough information that causes us to ask the bigger picture questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where do we go when we die? These bigger picture things that are really, what we're serving, our essence, our, humanity is looking for those answers. But what changes for all of that is when you start to peel back, you start to lift the veil and say, well, it's interdimensional, or it's multidimensional, or it's metaphysical. And when you start to have those questions, engage in those questions, and you start to think about that bigger picture, majority of people can't go there because they can't think outside of the paradigm that they've grown up to believe to be true. So that's really where, what we're trying to do with these films is get people to think a little bit deeper, ask more questions, and pose the question, what if this is all true? And look at it from that point of view. You don't have to believe, but you could still ask the question, what if it's true?
Well, you've got 2 films in the can now. You've got a third one in that you're currently putting together and working on. With all that, all the people that you've interviewed, all the evidence that you've looked at, have you had anything, and I'm not talking about being presented with evidence that's challenged your beliefs, have you had any strange, weird experiences since you started making these movies that seem to be related to this phenomenon?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Well, John, why don't you gonna talk maybe the calls, and then I'll tell them about the airport.
Yeah, well, I'll talk. There's things that have happened in our relationship with the development of Stan's story. We had phone calls where a voice would come. Not only one of them, it's a longer story that I won't go into the details about, but where 4 people were brought together. All of them got phone calls on their phone from their own. There's 2 people on cell phones, and when my phone was ringing, I looked down and it was the caller ID was my phone and my number. And when I answered it, there was other people connected to the line, and we all got connected. And then while we were connected, a voice came on to tell us that we were moving in the right direction, that we should stick to this. This is a very important story to tell, and this was pertaining to Stan's story. That happened multiple times. I got individual calls a few times. Jack and I got connected on 2 different occasions with messages. One of the messages was, be careful, you're being monitored, you're being watched, but just keep doing what you're doing.
And just to clarify, was this the Audrey voice?
The Audrey voice, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, a couple of those situations, and even more recently, we've had a string of events that have happened that are related to a potential project that we're investigating, where information has been shared with us through a very young child. That it's impossible that this child would know this information, and is sharing information with us that has been mind-boggling, not only specific to us, but specific to events that are happening in the world and specific locations in which they're happening. And there's telepathy involved in these, where messages are being delivered to this child, and the child is sharing information through pictures and what has been happening, and that information has been passed along to us, and specifically being implicated into this storytelling by name. So, so that go back to 2009-10 and all the way up to 2019. So over the past 10 years, we've had specific things happen to us. And Jack has one particular story that is profound experience that he had.
Yeah, to try to tell it quickly, but basically, we were working. It was during the time we were working on Stan's film, and I had gone out to New Mexico with my family, and so it was my wife and son. And at the time, he must have been about maybe 9 or 10 years old, my son. And we flew back from Albuquerque through Atlanta to get back to Florida. And when we got to Atlanta, as you know, Atlanta is an extremely busy airport. The terminal is just jam-packed. All the gates are crowded. And we had about 2 hours to kill before we caught our connecting flight to Florida. So we were walking down one of these towards through these gates, down one of these terminals. And I looked to my right, and when I looked to my right, I saw this girl standing there, a young girl. And when I tell you, like, I still can't, it's hard for me to describe just when you talk about having a double take, when you have a double take. Well, this was like a quadruple take. It was like, what am I looking at? And I looked over at this girl, and she was very slight, slender, reddish blonde hair, and her eyes were slanted and looked exactly like it looked like the photo from that we talked about with Stan's the little girl in Stan's photo, only the eyes were even more tilted towards the forehead. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And my son, who was 9 at the time, looked over, saw it as well. He says, "Dad, did you see that?" Now, he was around, my family was around when we had gotten some of these strange phone calls. So they were aware of everything that was going on. And my son, being 9, open-minded, cool kid, says, "Dad, could that be one of the aliens?" I mean, he just said it to me. Like, he's, because kids have no filter. He's just like, "Dad, did you see that?" And I looked over again, and she's standing there, and there's a guy sitting about 10 feet from her on a chair at one of the gates. And he looked at me, noticed that I noticed her, and he said he just looked at me and gave me a look like, "Yeah, do you see this?" So he was one of the few people that noticed, because most people just go about their business. And of course, even if you do notice it, what are you going to do? Most people would think, well, maybe she has some kind of a condition, right? Some kind of a genetic condition, whatever, what have you. But I'm like, wow, okay. So now it gets real interesting. So we keep walking, and I'm just like, I can't believe what I just saw. And we go, I'll never forget this. We went to a Chili's restaurant in Atlanta Airport. We order dinner, and I said, I have to go back. I have to go back and try to get a photo. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing my job. I would be a useless journalist. I have to try, because this is unbelievable. So I said, order me this. I'm going to go back. I'll be right back. I go. Now I'm walking the other way. So I know I'm going to be looking to my left at the gate to see where she is. I look over. There's nothing there. I look to my right. She's standing 10 feet in front of me, staring at me, and with a look on her face that's basically saying, "Can I help you?" In other words, she must have known I was coming back. She was waiting for me.
Do you think she was connected to you?
I don't know if she was connected to me. I think telepathically, I think she knew that I knew what she was. And the reason I knew what she was is because, oh, by the way, I just happened to be working on a documentary about the Stan Romanek story. Yeah. Most people have no clue, right? But I did. And my son did, because, again, he was experiencing the phone calls with us as a family. So I look over at her, and I'll tell you, that caught me off guard. That really
did you get it, though?
I didn't. I didn't, because it unnerved me so much that I couldn't. At that point, I thought she was going to be looking somewhere else, and I can get a picture of her without her seeing me. But she was literally staring right at me as if, yeah. And
so you were and I'm a sucker for details. So you're staring at her 10 feet away, and you're getting a straight on. You're looking at each other. You see her face. You see her eyes. I mean, they were obviously larger and slanted upward, I guess you said. Could you see the color of the iris? Did it look like a normal person's eyes, just bigger? I mean, what did it look like to you?
Yeah, normal person's eyes, but bigger and almost like a crystal blue, very light eyes. So whether it's like a crystal blue or a light green, they were very light. And what I did do, which I thought was good, was that I had, when we got home, I asked my son, I said, "Hey, can you just draw what you saw? Because I need to know what you think you saw." And he drew that. He drew exactly what I thought we had seen. And I'm like, yep, that's it. That was her. And so, yes, she's looking at me. And I tell you, when there's that moment of, I don't know if she was communicating with me telepathically, but looking back on it now, I wish I would have tried that. I would have tried, if I would have been more composed and I wouldn't have been caught off guard, because I was sneaking up to try to take a picture of her. So it wasn't the coolest thing in the world to do. I was kind of invading her privacy. But at the same time, I would have liked to have said, okay, telepathically, can you hear what I'm saying? Do you understand me? And if I would have heard back in my head, yes, I do, then that would have that would have been the icing on the cake. But I didn't do that because I was too flustered, and I had my phone. But then she started to walk towards one of the gates really quickly. I got my phone out, my phone meaning my phone, that was my camera. So she walked into the onto one of the whatchamacallits, the jetways, onto one of these flights. And I remember specifically the flight was to, of all places, Detroit, not New Mexico, not wherever, but Detroit, of all places. But then I'm thinking, well, what if she just went in there and then kind of interdimensional,
ditched you?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But she did very quickly, and I try to take a photo of her getting on boarding, but I don't even know if she really even boarded. I don't know what happened to her. But I tell that story because the coincidence is just, it's too much. I mean, the fact that here I am, we were neck deep in Stan's case. I mean, we were making this film. We had seen all his evidence. We had spent time with him, and here I am all of a sudden at Atlanta airport, of all places, and there's this girl that could not. It was either one of two things. It was either she had a genetic condition that I've never seen before, or she was some kind of a hybrid kind of being.
How old did she appear, and what was she wearing?
Early 20s. She was wearing like if I remember correctly, kind of like just jeans, like a pants, jeans, and just like a regular kind of, nothing that was flashy or anything like that. Very, very subdued. But what I did notice was, more than even the clothes, was how skinny she was. She was very petite, very slight person, and her hair color too, because I noticed it was more blondish, reddish, which we see in these other, we were seeing in these other photographs. So but it was the eyes. It was the eyes. Her other features didn't necessarily look all that out of whack. She had a nose, she had a mouth, she had ears. She did have the hair, with that hair color, but it was, again, very petite person. But if I hadn't gone back and then looked to my left and then looked to my right, and she's already waiting for me she knew I was coming back. I mean, that's how obvious it was. Well, how did she know that? So that's what, I can't explain it. Obviously, I can't say for sure who or what she was, but the fact that this happened right in the middle of when we were making the documentary was I think that it was more than just a coincidence.
Well, she's definitely in your head.
Well, here's another question. And again, it would be pure conjecture. Considering you're right in the middle of Stan's case and talking about his hybrid children, and they've appeared, do you think maybe this was one of his hybrid children?
Yes, I think it could have been, because, in my several decades on this planet, I'd never seen anything like that. So why all of a sudden at that moment am I seeing this? And yes, I do. I believe it could have been. And I believe it could have just been a nudge, like, okay, here we are. We're going to make ourselves known. Because, it's interesting when you're doing something like this and you see those photos and you hear the phone calls. And John and I had talked about this. And I know I had told John, it's like, John, I think that we are somehow going to make contact with these girl or little girls. I mean, I think we're going to have some kind of contact. And I even asked for it. You know how they say put things out to the universe? Well, I was like, look, if you're listening or you can hear me telepathically or understand me, I wouldn't mind meeting you. I think it would be really cool. So I didn't think it was going to happen. But again, that journalist comes out in me, right? That the 3D ego comes out and says, well, I don't know, maybe it was just a genetic condition. Maybe I'm making more of it. But the fact that my 9-year-old son's like, Daddy, is that one of the aliens? I mean, he just came out and said that.
Right.
It was like, it was that, that very innocent child, like, there's no filter. It's like, Dad, I think that's one of the aliens. So I tell that story because it's so cool. It really is so cool. And it's just one of those things I'll never forget. I'll never have an answer to unless I see her again one day, which that would be really neat. And maybe she would communicate with me, whether telepathically or otherwise. And, I'm hoping that happens to all of us. I really always say to John, I think that, we keep doing this. And I think that if our intentions are good, and our intentions have been good all along, that I think that we could maybe, for our own benefit, for no one else's benefit, but for our own benefit, to maybe have that kind of experience.
You could also put it out there again now. But you did it once before. You're still working on this. Put it out again and maybe see what happens. You never know. I've never really had. Well, I can't say never. I've had a couple of strange experiences in the last couple of years that I can't explain. And one was seeing a series of 15 to 20 lights moving through the sky that were not drones, and they weren't ultralights, and I to this day can't explain them. I didn't hear anything as they were going by. Unfortunately, I was stuck in traffic. I couldn't pull over or get out or get a picture of it, but I watched these things move across the sky and going past me. That was one. The more strangest one was I was in Colorado for a while, and I was out in the San Luis Valley, which is supposed to be a very big UFO hotspot. In fact, there's they have out there, I don't know if you've heard of the UFO Watchtower, which attracts a lot of people out there. And they were having a conference there that weekend. I went to it. And then at night, they were doing sky watching. And so the first night, we're sitting out and just looking up at the sky. And there was a lot of clouds, so you really couldn't see much. But then as I'm looking up, I had this vision. And I call it a vision because I don't know what else to call it. That all of a sudden I'm looking in the clouds, and in the clouds forms a gray alien face, clear as day. And I look at it, and then I blink, and then I open my eyes, and it's still there. And it was more of like an image overlay. It wasn't the clouds. You're looking at the clouds and you're dealing with pareidolia, like you see pink elephants or giraffes or whatever. No, this was a clear monochromatic outline of a gray alien face. And it lasted for about 30 seconds before it went away. I can't explain it. I have no idea what caused that. And again, I closed my eyes, I shook my head, I looked back, it was still there. Later that night, I was sitting out in front of my tent and just doing some more sky watching. I was out by myself. Everybody else had gone to bed. Nothing really happened. And then I'm getting ready to go to bed. I just happened to turn and look to my left. And all of a sudden, I see this streak of light, just like something come out of the sky 10, 15 feet above the ground, shoot towards the ground in an arc. It was super bright and then vanish in a flash. It was like a burst of energy. A ball of light just goes whoop, like a hook. And once again, I had to stop and look at it and double check. And, I'm wearing glasses, so I had to go, well, is it reflection in my glasses? Something reflecting? There's no other lights. Everyone gone to bed. There's no lights out. There's nothing for it to reflect on, not even a campfire. And yet, so in that one night, I had these two experiences. Can't explain them. Can't tell you what it was I saw, or I really don't know to this day. All I can say is very strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think it's Rick Nelson says in the first film is that not enough people look up to the sky, or if they see something, they immediately try to dismiss it because they don't have a place in their brain for what they're seeing. So just imagine if more people were just a little bit more sensitive to the fact that maybe every once in a while I should look up. Maybe every once in a while I should wonder what's out there. And you never know what you might be exposed to as a result of having that thought in your mind, as opposed to dismissing everything that you see, feel, or experience as being, oh, that was just a breeze. Oh, that was just a cloud formation. Oh, well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe we're more intuitive and we're more tuned in than we think we are, but we've been conditioned not to. I'm a firm believer that, organized school takes the wonder out of the child. It doesn't encourage it. We're more, I think we're at our most raw and most intuitive before we start to engage in something that's more structured to try to homogenize thought. Then, the wonder kind of slowly disappears until you choose to reconnect with it. So, I think we need to be a little bit more in tune with that side of our consciousness and subconscious to wonder what that might be.
Modern schooling just teaches you how to memorize things, and it doesn't teach you to think, just teaches you to memorize. That's why I have a great respect for more of the indigenous cultures, the Aboriginal cultures that, we as white society, to use a perfect example, when we came over here from the New World, and we tried to make the savages more like us, and teach them to go to our schools and bring them our religion, and they need to learn. But they already had a great culture. They were more in tune with the land. They were more in tune with nature. And I think that's one of the things that we've really have had programmed out of us is being in tune with our planet, with nature, which is just as important to how we're experiencing this life. We're missing out on so much. It's not just from a conservational aspect and saving the planet and not screwing it up, but having that connection with the forces, the different types of forces that are going on all around us that we ignore because we're told to ignore it. It's your imagination.
Right. No, I completely agree.
So, very interesting stuff. We got a few more minutes left here in the program. Now, this documentary, can you mention again what platforms, what day it's coming out, what platforms it can be found on?
It'll be released on September 3rd at 3 a.m. People ask, is that significant? No, that's just what we're at 3 a.m. Eastern time. We had nothing to do with that. It was all arranged through our distributor. So there's no subliminal message or intentional message with that. It's just when it is. And it is the best place to go and find out more information is the film's website, which is extraordinarytheseeding.com. That has the trailer, so you can watch the trailer there. It also has a music video there's a music video of a single that's in the trailer, closing credits that's in there. It also has the platforms in which it will be available and a couple of links to click on if you want to pre-order the film.
Now, with this film coming out now, how far are you into the production or pre-production for the third film?
Production is done. We're in post-production on the third film, as we speak. So our goal is to have that one out in the fall of next year.
Okay, fantastic.
So we can do this all over again a year from now.
Now, with that film then in the can, you're doing your post-production. Where do you think you want to go from here? You've done 3 films on the Extraordinary series. Do you have any ideas yet or plans on if you want to continue this, if you want to go in a different direction? What do you guys see the future coming for you in the next few years?
Oh, boy. Well, we have 3 or 4 other really strong story ideas that we're thinking about doing. But we, at first we weren't sure whether we were going to stay in the paranormal realm. The 1091 Media, our distributor, the person that we deal with directly, Jim Martin, that's his area is paranormal and sports. So that's his area to find films in those genres and documentaries in those genres to promote and to distribute. So, but we have a lot of people are contacting us now with their stories. But we've developed a couple of ideas over the last couple of years that would all be strong stories to tell, and they're all basically in the paranormal realm, the ETs, UFOs, whatnot, metaphysical. But that doesn't mean, I think now we're going to stick with doing, because we feel like there's more to tell. There really is more to tell. And so we want to continue to tell those stories, but that doesn't mean that down the road we won't get into other areas. But there's plenty of really compelling stories within this genre that deserve attention. So we're just we're kind of just figuring out what our options are. But it's nice to have those options. It really is. And I'm sure, John, you agree. I mean, the fact that we have a couple of really strong story ideas is really a nice problem to have.
And we kind of have one that's already in pre-production that we may move into production in the January, February timeframe. We still have to work out some things with the individual that we're going to be. It's somebody that we interviewed for the third film. We actually interviewed him for the second film, but held that back for the third film. There's 4 people that we interviewed for the second film that didn't make it in to the second film because we felt that their story would be better served in the third installment. So one of them is a standout story all by itself, and we've already had the conversations about telling that story, and that may come to fruition rather quickly. But we're kind of focused right now on launching this film, finishing posts on the third one before we get too deep on our fourth one. But we're going to keep the extraordinary moniker as a marketing branding device for us. And so our goal would be to continue telling extraordinary stories.
Well, I'm going to throw one thing out at you, one name out at you, and if it's something you're already looking into, you can just, well, we can bypass it for now, but have you heard the story of John Edmonds and his ranch in Arizona, the Stardust Ranch?
I have not.
You have not.
That's different than the Skywalker Ranch?
It's different, and you know what? I'll send you some information because he has had...
It's different but similar.
It's similar, but it has a much more dark story surrounding it. He's been on a couple of television programs. We've interviewed him here on our show. He's lived on this ranch for 20 years. He's tried selling it, but he can't sell it. He and his wife have had very horrific things happening from not only the UFO aspect, but actually being physically attacked by these gray beings, gray entities. And I know he's been looking at trying to get something off the ground to tell the story. He wants the ranch to be more of a research area for people, but there's a real compelling story there. Now, I'm not saying it's something you guys should do. I'm pitching it just because I find it personally interesting in the research I've done with him. But so I can send you some information.
Has he still got the ranch?
Yes, he still has it.
Oh,
yes, he does. Well, you know what?
Worth looking into.
Definitely. I'm somebody who's very interested in these areas around the Earth that have what I call high strangeness to it. Mm-hmm. Not just sure. It doesn't necessarily have
the Glendaris Valley.
Yeah, like where you live there, your UFO highway there, Irene. Yeah, places that have not just one particular type of phenomenon, but all sorts of different types of phenomena. So. Definitely. Well, gentlemen, we have reached the end of the program and want to thank you both for being on the show. Just to mention, our guests tonight have been Jon Sumple and Jack Roth, and talking about their brand new documentary film, Extraordinary, The Seeding, which is coming out September 3rd. And gentlemen, I wish you the best of luck with this show, and then we'll definitely have to have you back when the next one comes out.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Okay. One thing that I wanted to do that we haven't done a very good job of is thanking everybody that's been involved with the project, and a couple of people, in particular. From the production point of view, it's monumental what we were able to accomplish from, with the limited amount of budget we had. So I really want to thank Ray Cerna for the work that he did, and Patrick Lomontini for what they were able to accomplish on set. In post-production, Patrick, again, editor, phenomenal work, phenomenal communication process with him, and also Anton Patzner for the score, which is amazing, Joe Mandia for the illustrations that are amazing. My son contributed the song in the closing credits. But from coordinating everything and getting us in touch with the right people to help us really get the right people on camera. It was a monumental effort from both Lori Wagner and Chase Klodsky, who are our co-producer and associate producer. They connected us with the people that we didn't have access to, and that really helped us, I think, make a much stronger presentation of people in the film. So I really wanted to take a moment to thank everybody involved, but also my production partners at J3 Films, Jackie and Jamie Cernoff as well. It takes a village to create something like this, especially people who are willing to do it for a lot of it for the love of craft, as opposed to making boatloads of money, because we just try to do it as professional as we can for the lowest amount of money that we can. And these guys are willing to step up, and they deliver.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. We'll be back next week with an all brand new show. And if you miss us, you can always find our podcasts on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, and where else, Irene?
Anywhere. Everywhere.
There we go.
Everywhere, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night. We'll catch you next time.
Okay, bye.
Okay, we're